We are going to go ahead and start rolling here, and people will come in, but we'll just start moving along. Thanks everybody for joining us on this Wednesday evening. We know there are a lot of things you can do with your evening. We appreciate you hanging out with us. I'm Emilie Tweardy. I'm an agroforester with Appalachian Sustainable Development. We've got Katie Trazo here, who you want to unmute and introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, I'm a food systems and network outreach specialist at Virginia Tech for the Center for Food Systems and Community Transformation. Glad to be here with y'all today.
Yeah, we're happy you're here. All right, here's where we're headed tonight. We are just going to talk briefly about how this series came to be and acknowledge our partners, because it does take a lot of cross-organizational work to get these going, and we're really proud of the stuff we've put together and of all the partner work. We're going to do a little poll to hear who's in the audience. And then Adam's going to talk about our topic this evening, which is managing of diverse agroforestry systems, focusing on silvopasture and alley cropping. And then we'll get into the Q&A. The Q&A is split into two parts. The first part is a more curated questions that have been submitted ahead of time. There was a function for that. And if you missed that this time, you can take advantage next time. There's always a little form on our website where you can fill out and submit questions for the host ahead of time to make sure that your question gets answered. And then the second half, we'll do a little live Q&A where anyone can ask a question. And if you're the kind of person who's got like a really long question and maybe it's kind of specific, you can also raise your hand, and there's a little hand raise button, and we can unmute you so that you can ask with your voice. So a little bit about ASD, Appalachian Sustainable Development. Our mission is to build a thriving regional food and ag system that creates healthy communities, respects the planet, and cultivates profitable opportunities for Appalachians. So that's what we're all about. Will you do one more slide, Katie? Oh, we go back to, there should be a second ASD slide.
Sorry.
All good.
Let's see.
Good. It's, it's a Wednesday. It's a Wednesday.
Okay, here we go. There we are.
There we go. So yeah, like I said, we've got that really robust mission, but we're a nonprofit. We're working towards a stronger Appalachia through agriculture. Our work falls into 5 different categories: workforce development, agriculture education, food access, economic development, and resources management, which is where agroforestry falls. Okay, now you can move forward. Now that I did my spiel, thank you. And we've got a lot of great resources just on our website, but we also have, if you're really into this kind of like deep dive information, we have a whole series of self-paced online trainings called Agroforestry Trainings for Natural Resources Professionals. And if you go to learnagroforestry.com, you can access several free modules as a part of these courses. And then there's also some paid modules on all of the federally recognized agroforestry practices. But the Intro to Agroforestry and the Social Competencies course are both free. So check those out. And that's more of the same. All right, and I'm going to hand it off to Katie because I want y'all to hear about what an awesome collaboration this has been.
Yeah, so we're excited to help in hosting this Ask an Agroforester winter series along with Appalachian Sustainable Development. And we're able to do this through a grant we wrote to the Sustainable Ag Research and Education program. It's a professional development grant project, and it's called Expanding the Agroforestry Regional Knowledge Exchange Network in Virginia. So we have all these partners that are bringing forward this project, a lot of them on the call today. Here, Adam, Emilie, and folks from different organizations I see folks in the audience who are joining us in this collective work. So hello and thank you. So what is the ARC Exchange? It's ultimately a peer-to-peer learning network where farmers, NGOs, universities, technical service providers, ag educators can all work together in knowledge generation and sharing for agroforestry. They can share through farm tours, webinars, recorded videos, and just kind of have a way of working through the barriers and addressing the opportunities of agroforestry in the Appalachian region. It's really a diffuse network of anybody who's in Appalachian states, and you can connect by joining our listserv. You can email me at ketrazo@vt.edu with Join the ARC Exchange listserv. I'll put that in the chat here in a second. There will be more information coming on a website soon, and there are a lot of farmers involved in the network that want to have folks out to see their agroforestry practices. So there will be farm tours coming up this year and much more. So stay in the loop with us on that. And just a little background, the ARC Exchange was initiated and is coordinated by Virginia Tech Forest Resources and Environmental Conservation, Dr. John Munsell and Dr. Ian Nichols. They initiated it through a grant project, the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grants Program, which I'll share in a second, because that's a really great opportunity for farmers to be able to receive funding to get agroforestry on the ground and to begin being part of this ARC Exchange network. And then Appalachian Sustainable Development and our Center for Food Systems and Community Transformation have also taken lead on different grant projects that are supporting this. So it truly is a collective effort, and we're really excited to keep supporting the ARC Exchange network. So please join us through our listserv. And just wanted to give a quick shout out again to the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grants Program. There's direct financial support available to farmers up to $1,500 an acre for agroforestry practices in Virginia and beyond. And they'll begin reviewing applications April 1st. And the applications are relatively easy. So if you hear about it tonight and you're interested, go check it out on the website. We're going to share some additional resources in a second that are a webinar and another spreadsheet with information about that project. So we'll put that information in the chat, but invite you to look into it if you're interested. And I'm going to pass it to Emilie. She's going to take a poll. We're just curious who's in the audience with us regarding farmers, natural resource professionals. I know a lot of folks span both of those groups. So invite you to just take a moment to fill out this poll and help us see who's in the room with us.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I'm just going to talk through a couple slides here. So this is the funding edition of the Ask an Agroforester series that Katie just mentioned. We talk about the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program, Assets, which is a carbon credit grant program tie-in with agroforestry, and also the Expanding Agroforestry Project. So if you're interested in those different funding pools, check that out. It's free to watch on YouTube. And Katie, do you have the link? Yeah. If you want to look at the spreadsheet that kind of talks about like these different buckets of funding and how they can overlap or sometimes explicitly not overlap, and what practices are accepted, et cetera, across these three different ones, we've got that really handy dandy table for you. And also, just want to share that this last session we did with Duran Chavez is now live on YouTube, also about agroforestry in the urban context. And he's a real mover and shaker in Richmond and is doing tons of great work. So that is a fun listen as well. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share the results. So looks like we've got a lot of farmers in the house, 50%, and more than that, so 66%, because we've got 16% that are both farmers and NRPs. And interesting, no natural resources professionals that aren't also farmers. I feel like that is often the case, so that's kind of cool. And then quite a few others too. So any of those other folks or anyone who's just interested in sharing, feel free to share who you are and what you do in the chat as we move forward. All right, so on to the man of the hour. I'm gonna read Adam's bio and we're gonna let him get going here. So I'm going to start with who Adam is, and then we'll talk about what he does. Adam is a native of Tazewell County, Virginia, and earned his BA in Environmental Studies at Emory and Henry College and a Master's of Ag at Oklahoma State University. He has worked as a farm intern for author Barbara Kingsolver, whoop, whoop, and husband Stephen Hopp in Meadowview, Virginia, producing vegetables for restaurants and tending to sheep, turkeys, and chickens. He also served 2 years in the Peace Corps as a forestry extension agent in Mukashi, Zambia, installing demonstration plots and leading workshops on conservation agriculture in an effort to increase food security and prevent deforestation. Before joining the ranks of Virginia Tech, Adam worked as a project coordinator in West Virginia for both the West Virginia Farmers Market Association and the West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition. He's also the co-owner / operator of Singing Spring Farm with his wife Eliza and son Luke, who are both awesome, by the way. They manage a diversified homestead operation involving dairy goats, wool sheep, pastured poultry, annual vegetable production, and many different perennial fruit and medicinal tree and shrub species. And how about what he does for work? Adam Taylor works with Virginia Tech faculty members and graduate students to implement and maintain research projects and demonstration plots on the ground at Virginia Tech Catawba Sustainability Center. And if y'all haven't been there, I'm sure that you'll be convinced that you need to go by the time he's done talking this evening, because it's an awesome spot. The most recognized work of the CSC has focused around agroforestry sites that include multifunctional riparian buffers, silvopasture, nutrient management, alley cropping, and non-timber forest products, and regenerative agricultural practices that complement them, such as grass-finished beef and crop production. I made it. I made it through the long bio. So Adam deserves a long bio because he's got a lot of great experience and has done a lot of really amazing things. And I will share that right before we hopped on tonight, he was like, we were talking about, you know, just hump day being Wednesday and different things you do in the evenings. He's like, oh, it's my free night. I get to work late, which we got a kick out of. So I hope that will give you a sense of the kind of guy he is. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to him so he can do his thing.
Thank you all so much. And thanks everybody for attending. I'm happy to be here. And I'm just going to take you guys through a little bit kind of what we do here at the center.
Is it just me or is Adam frozen?
Adam, come back.
We broke it in the first 30 seconds of him presenting.
This is why we have the backup.
This is why we have the backup.
Okay, he'll be coming. Don't worry. I know he's doing everything and is just powered to be here with us right now.
It looks like Adam logged out. I think what we'll do is get Katie to pull his slides up and screen share. Does that sound good, Katie? And then maybe he'll have enough bandwidth if he just talks through it.
We can try that. I thought you were going to say we can see if Katie can sing us a song.
Just kidding. Yeah. There's also that.
Okay. Well, I can work on that and see when Adam pops back.
Ooh, I see something that says Adam Taylor's talking. There he is.
Oh, my back. Sorry so much. I think everything decided to die right when I
all good.
Signed on. So my bad. Let's try this again.
Let's do it. We got it.
Sorry. I'm in Catawba. So you know, rural internet is wonderful, right?
No worries at all. It's a good excuse for everybody to just like slow down and be silent for a moment. I feel like none of us get that very much.
All right. Can everyone see the screen? Is it good now? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. We
awesome.
gotcha.
Sorry about that. So yeah, our farm is 378 acres. We do a number of things, mostly around agroforestry, which we're going to talk about today as far as silvopastures and alley cropping goes. But you know, we manage warm native season grasses. We have a small grass-fed beef cattle herd doing non-timber forest products. We're breeding American chestnut trees. You know, we're growing mushrooms. We're looking at wetland restoration. We're doing some small crops, vegetables, organic crops, and a lot of different stuff. But we're excited to talk to you guys about silvopasture today. To set up silvopasture, just to very briefly, you know, it does kind of incorporate into our grass-finished beef operation. So what we do is we buy steers from local farmers who do a stream exclusion. We bring them to the farm, and then we run them through what we call an adaptive grazing management system for around 18 months in order to see if we can create a better quality grass-finished beef. Better quality meaning higher fat content, more marbling, things like that. And then moving them every, 1 to 5 days to fresh forage, depending on the time of year. So this is kind of a little scheme of our paddocks. We can break these down into smaller paddocks, somewhere around, giving us almost 45 to 50 some different paddocks orientations that we can do. So I say that because it brings us into about 3 different forage systems that our cattle experience during their time in a given season. So of course, what we'll talk today in the top left here, silvopasture. In the bottom left, that's going to be open range or open land on cool season forages. And then the larger picture on the right is going to be native warm season grasses that we do mostly in the summertime. So for a small overview of the silvopasture we've been operating, for the last 10 years or so, it's 12 acres large. About 8 years in, we introduced livestock. Our tree spacings are about 16 feet with 50-foot alleys, and that varies. A lot of times it's in 16 by 16 and 3 rows of trees, and I'll show you some pictures of that later. The kind of the goals of the silvopasture here at Catawba is, number one, demonstration. So people can come here, they can see what we're doing with it, walk through it, see it. If you catch it at the right time of year, you might see some cattle grazing in there. The other goal is, kind of timber value. How can we grow trees that eventually you can, reap some kind of timber value benefit from? That can be from both pulpwood and some nice hardwoods. Right, so you can see our list of trees that we have in here. Black walnut, red oak, black locust. We actually have some 1516 American chestnut hybrids in there, not doing so good because the deer love to eat them. Bald cypress, interesting one, you wouldn't see in an upland planting. Our pitch lob hybrid is our number one grower that we're seeing. We have some shortleaf pine, white pine, tulip poplar, and some unintentional sycamore. I think it got just mislabeled as a tulip poplar and then got put into the mix, but they're doing well. And we use them in a different bit of ways. So like one area we have very dense planted trees that's all black walnut and red oak. And we're seeing how close can we plant the trees together and how long will they grow that we can still see adequate forage supply underneath. And those trees are all on 10 by 10s. And then we use some of the faster growing trees like the pitch lob hybrid on either side. So one row here, and then in the middle we'll put a slower growing, more timber desirable tree like a black walnut or a red oak or a chestnut to act as trainer trees, mimicking that forest environment. So it has to shoot for that bit of daylight up there. All kinds of different demos things going on, different forages. We looked at different land management kind of things for how to manage weeds around the trees. And it's all just, for us to learn and to figure more out about silvopastures and agroforestry and how it kind of relates to the farmscape here. So this is the beginning of it, planted in 2014. We just took a field. I wasn't even here before I started working here, but a field was taken that had kind of the better soils that we saw on the soil maps on the farm, and then planted in silvopasture. And then, over time, it was, bare root whips that we planted. So they're small trees. Of course, you don't want to introduce livestock like cattle at that time. So we maintained it by mowing it. So for the first 3 years, I think it did get a glyphosate spray, just in a 2-foot ring around like all the books say and stuff like that. And then we mowed, used a 0 turn. You can kind of see the difference between the green here and then the white in the middle. So like we were using a finishing mower around the trees, and then we were bush hogging and flail mowing in the larger alleyways, those 50-foot alleyways. And we maintained it like that for about 8 years. And you can see it, it grows. It's still mowed. And then this is what it looks like today. Our trees, 25 feet tall, something like that. Cattle can sustain them. They're not going to break them over if they made it. In the first little bit, they did break some trees of the softer woods like tulip poplars and stuff over. But for the most part, it's mature enough to handle large beef cattle that we run, that range around, 800 to 1,300 pounds. So yeah, here's some of the pictures from, when we started with it. You can see the smaller trees here. We just took a chance on it. It just got, I think we'll talk about it later, but, with these grant funded, university driven kind of systems, your funding runs out because, the grant ends in 3 years. And then you have 0 money to maintain and manage the plot. And so we were, spending our own money out of our operating budget for the farm to just mow when we have amazing mowers that produce beef, right? You know, cattle, they're great. We can put them in there. They'll eat the grass down. We move them. They, you know, throw their biology in, and it, you know, makes the soil better, makes the grass better, and we move along. And so that is much more economical and leads to a better product, you know, per se, in the end, by having the cattle in there. Some of the other things that you might see on the left picture here, you know, we have some tulip poplars here. This is some heavy damage that they done. You can see we pruned them up, you know, to a certain height, but the cattle still, you know, love those tulip poplar leaves. And I don't know if you can tell, if you see my mouse between this tree and this tree, these little trees here, those are ones that the cows actually rubbed on so hard that they broke it over because they love the leaves so much. So we sustained a bit of damage as we were, you know, getting established. But now that they've, you know, taken out everything they're going to take out, you know, we're able to, you know that the trees that are there are the trees that are going to be there. And we're still not worried about, you know, the shade compromise there. We're still getting plenty of shade, plenty of good forage for the cows. And then they're doing a really good job. Some of the questions we kind of have, you can see the picture on the right. You know, we thought as the, you know, the cattle had access to continuous shade that they wouldn't herd up, you know, like they do in a field where there's one tree, herd up and like chew their cud. But there's certain areas, you know, where they're doing that, especially among bald cypress. And we're answering a lot of questions around that on like, is it because the bald cypress hasn't been pruned up and we've left it shaggy, that they feel like more safe in there, that they all herd up and then create kind of like a biological disaster in there because they've, you know, brought the dirt, the soil down to bare soil, eliminated all the forage on top. And so the regrowth that we're getting in those areas is undesirable, you know, forage species like short nettle and thistle and teasel and things like that you would expect from like a spray. But yeah, over time, as we introduced the cows, we saw that the limbs were too low. And then if we're going to prune, thinking that this might be a valuable timber tree, you know, we want to take care of all the lowest branches that we can. And then we want to give, you know, room for wind and the cattle themselves to like move through the silvopasture. So we've pruned most of them up, you know, as high as really I can reach with a, you know, 20-inch chainsaw bar up in the trees. You know, we haven't gone crazy and climbed them or anything like that. But doing that, you know, after a certain number of years, it really boosted and accelerated the growth of the softwood trees. And so they've really exponentially grown since we did that. And there's still more to do and more to consider. But here's another example of, these are bald cypress, and you can see the bare dirt in there and how they've, you know, clumped up. So, you know, what I look at that, what I need to do maybe is, you know, prune those trees up so that they can, you know, see to the other side, that they're looking at that as some kind of protection that they need to be in. That's, you know, we're safe in this area, nothing can get to us. So we're going to hump down in here and then create this big soil bald spot that won't grow good forage the next year. So that's kind of the stuff we're trying to avoid. But, you know, in the end, this is what we're after. You know, the silvopasture for us, you know, does a number of things. You know, we run black cattle because that's what everybody runs around here. And we want to be, you know, similar production styles as much as we can to area farmers so that they can come by and they see, oh, they have black cattle, but those black cattle are behaving different. They're on fresh forage. They're in silvopasture. So, you know, the shade is important to us. You know, when we're not running the cattle in the designated silvopasture, you know, we have a mobile shade unit. So just so they can get shade, we realize that black cattle have experienced some stress, you know, once the temperatures reach around 78, 80 degrees. And our goal is to, you know, make them as stress-free as possible so we can, you know, create quality beef in the end. And then you know, the shade itself is kind of lending on the shade of the forages, right? So the forages are growing slower. You know, there's shade tolerant and cool season grasses, right? And so the slower growth is going to lend to a higher nutritional value in the forages. That's also what we want, because our end goal is quality grass-finished beef. And on the left here, you can see that's where we started. Those were the first beef we ever finished here at Catawba. And then 5 years later, on the right, you can see that we're getting higher fat content, more marbling, and it's all kind of due to this management practice. So I'll just move in real quick to alley cropping. It's a new one for us. We're only moving into our second season with alley cropping. We planted the trees about a year ago and then tried 1 year, and then we're going to try again here. But this is the field that we chose and designated here at Catawba, and we split it into 2 sites, A and B. A being more of like a smaller scale homestead or small scale vegetable production mimicry, and then B being a larger scale. So A is about 2 acres and B is 7. So in B, we're growing more of like an industrial crop or a commodity crop, you would say, whereas A, we're doing more, vegetable, homesteady kind of stuff. So alley cropping, if you're not familiar, it benefits the farm in many ways. For us, it's a multi-use, multi-purpose, diversified system, which is what we like out here. And then we're looking forward to, build our soil health. That was a degraded hayfield that had, someone had planted Johnson grass into and fertilized for 20 years and just reaped the nutrients off of it year after year, 2 cuttings of hay. So we want to really build that soil health. And then we want to feed our cows, fodder, forages, feeds. What can we produce off of it? And integrate that livestock impact into the system. And then human food, we're growing corn, winter squash. And then economic development. How can we minimize the inputs through an agroforestry system to maximize the overall economic value of the crop that you produce? So, we're in soil health, carbon sequestration, through the way that we manage the ground. We're using cover crops, when we can, a fall cover crop. And then on our crop rotation, one of them is a year-long cover crop. So a spring, a summer, and a fall. We're retaining all our residues, to break down as organic matter through no-till kind of crop production, hoping that'll all work to enhancing our microbiology within the soil. For the cattle, we planted mulberry, which is a good fodder feed. Poplar, same as we talked about from the silvopasture. Honey locust produces a really nice nut pod that that falls that cattle can eat. And blueberries, they'll eat the leaves and the fodder off of that. And then we're growing alfalfa in there that we probably could graze instead of bale. And then, for human food, blueberries, corn, winter squash, and then the beef itself. And then for floral, Foss indica and comfrey. So you can see that there's a lot of different things happening within that system. That's only 9 acres. So it's layered and layered and layered on all the benefits that we can get from it. So here's what site A and site B looked like.
Oh, it happened again. Oh,
So
here he is. Hey, it's okay. We can edit it out for YouTube. No one will ever know after tonight.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. This hasn't really happened to me here. So yeah, I'll just keep rambling really quick. So how we set it up, setting up an alley crop kind of depends on, what kind of cropping you're going to do. What's the equipment that you need to run through it. So, side A, we set up at, 50 foot alleys, and that's based on like a 10-foot seed drill that we can run through 5 passes. So we don't want a double pass. And then site B was set up in 70 foot alleys because we're harvesting an alfalfa crop. So, we were able, I think 35 foot or something was the width of my V rake that I used to make hay. And so, that gives us, without making a double pass, we can run through between the trees. We still did the trees a little wider, 20 to 25 foot spacing. And then I like a big old turnaround. So 80 foot turnarounds there. And so these are our spacing requirements, plant needs for, what we plant. You can see the spacing requirements for the trees there on the left. As far as the crops go, alfalfa, I planted heavy. I think it usually calls for about 25 to 30 pounds the acre. But given what we were up against with transitioning the field, I felt it was necessary to go ahead and double my seed rate. So I went 50 pounds on that. Corn standard rates and pumpkin as well, 25 pounds the acre. And we use automatic planting for that. So how did I prep it? Now, this might be something that, controversial among some people. On this farm, I'll just go ahead and say I do not use chemicals. I try my best not to use chemicals, but in certain situations, it becomes necessary. So there's two ways I could have prepped this field. First way being and tilled it or dissed it and created a ton of bare earth and then went in and tried to seed it right back up. I feel that that's a little destructive. I think there's like already things existing in the ground, opening that soil to water and air erosion. In the long term, I feel like the best way to transition a field is to use a chemical. Glyphosate is what we use, Roundup, that most people know. And we sprayed the field in Roundup. We let it burn down, about 10 to 12 days after it's been sprayed. Good, adequate burn you get on it. And then the machine you see in the picture, this is our no-till seed drill that we went in, and then we seeded winter rye as a cover on it the fall before planting. And so then we planted. And so for this one, we were fortunate enough to not use bare root small whips, that we actually got like 6-year-old mature trees that we were able to put in and get a little game, which made a huge difference. The only problem was, moving those trees. They weighed about 250 pounds each. So moving them became, a creative endeavor. But we did plant in spring of 23. We had some Virginia Tech students come out, and this is what we ended up with: 66 honey locusts, 28 mulberries, 8 tulip poplars, 180 false indigo, 136 blueberries, 401 comfreys. And, this is how, we would plant it normally, dibble bars and shovels, manpower. But then with these big trees, like I said, we got creative and figured out we could tie a rope on the top of an excavator and move the trees around, set them down, dig the hole, push them in and cover them up. I think I was getting good at about like 5 minutes a tree is about what it was taking me to plant one of those big trees. So that was probably the funnest part of it. But here you can see how the no-till seed drill in the lines, the rows it created. You can see the winter rye coming up there below. So in the summer, I took a roller crimper and we crimped all that rye down. Planted corn, winter squash, and a cover crop. But what we didn't expect was that, our cover crop wouldn't really be the best weed barrier that we needed. And Johnson grass is an aggressive grass. And so it came through our crimped cover crop and really outcompeted our winter squash and our corn. Our corn did fare, our winter squash did not. I've never in my life seen a deer eat winter squash. I've planted it 10 years and never seen a deer touch it until I planted it in this alley cropping scenario, and they wreaked havoc on it. Corn, was just outcompeted by the winter squash, by the Johnson grass. And then we had a bear and a deer get in there, and they really kind of took our crop. We might have had a small crop, but nothing like, we would expect. And then, in the center row, we did a summer cover crop of Japanese millet and a forage soybean. And it did really well. We decided to take a different approach on the no-till since it hasn't been tilled and the Johnson grass is already killing us. I went ahead and disked that center row and then broadcast seeded the cover crop in it, and it ended up doing pretty good. I was impressed by it. And then we had a good cover that we terminated in the late summer, and then right now it sets in winter rye and hairy vetch ready for us to go this year. The alfalfa was another thing that was a little different for me. We wanted to plant it early because we were doing like some workshops and we wanted to show it off. But then we had a dry summer, and then the Johnson grass came in. I had the seed there, and I was worried that if I went ahead and planted it, that the Johnson grass would take over and I would spend, I would lose all that money that we had invested in alfalfa seed, which isn't so cheap. So I waited until the fall to plant it. And so I actually ended up going and spraying again a glyphosate to kill the Johnson grass. And then once we got wet in the fall around September, I went ahead and planted the alfalfa, and it is looking pretty good right now. So we're expecting a pretty good alfalfa crop, this year. So there you go. That's what our crop looked like. A big old deer running through the field. But the trees have all done really well. So we had some scraping from horn scraping from bucks, but I don't think it affected them. And then we have a deer fence going in immediately this spring. We just got all the supplies delivered last week, so hopefully we'll take care of that and continue to work with the alley cropping. I think it's a good thing. Eventually I would like to see the trees get up a little bit and then run a hybrid system of like alley crop plus silvopasture in it. Why can't the cows come in and, eat crop residues or take the last cutting of alfalfa and have that animal impact and work that biology into that soil and continue to build it over time and make it better? Why can't they eat what's left over from the corn? Why can't they eat the summer cover crop? And I think that's the best plan moving forward for it. But, I think it'll take us a couple of years to get there. But that's anything in my experience with like a newly established, like agroforestry site that I've worked with, is that it's going to take a little bit of time to get it going. So, for our work in the alley cropping, we had hosted some trainings with ASD here, and then people thought it was cool, so we got some media attention. But we'll continue to work on it, and I'm being, just straightforward, saying that, even though we're Virginia Tech and we're supposed to be on top of all this, our agricultural A game, sometimes we fail, and this is a perfect example of a failure. And all we can do is learn, what we did wrong, what we didn't factor in, and how we can improve, year to year. And that's with, everything we're doing here at Catawba. So, yep. Maybe a little shorter, but I wanted to leave room for everybody to ask as many questions and have a conversation with everybody that I can. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing all that, all those great photos and just, your insight. I look forward to hearing some more of that. And also just appreciate your honesty about, this stuff is hard. And, these are not necessarily new concepts, but sort of like culturally reintroduced, I'll say, concepts for us now in the world of conventional ag. And, we have to relearn a lot of this stuff. And I think you're doing a really good job of that. And we appreciate you. So before we move into the Q&A, we're going to do our first little super fast quick fire round. So this is like, answer in 20 seconds or less. All right. So favorite farm tool?
polybraid.
You want to explain that for folks who don't know?
It's the movable fence that we use for the cattle, and it's so versatile. My polybraid and my step-in posts, I can move my cattle kind of anywhere I want, make them do anything. I can, give them big open spaces. I can tighten them down to get its trampling effect. Yeah, it's the most valuable tool definitely on the farm.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Portable electric just changed the game, didn't it? It's just wild. All right. Last thing you planted.
We just had a horse farming conference, and we did the pre-conference here at Catawba, and a friend of mine gave me a whole bunch of Sochan, which is a Cherokee edible that I planted out in various locations.
Awesome. Very cool. What kind of plant is that? Is that a woody perennial? Is that herbaceous?
It's I guess herbaceous. I'm still learning a little bit about it, but it's
cool.
Herbaceous, loves like wet areas, and then it's like that and like spring nettles are kind of like the first greens you can eat in the spring.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look that up. All right. And what is your favorite breakfast food?
Oh, I'm an Appalachian boy. Biscuits.
Biscuits and gravy, or just like biscuits with any?
Biscuits and gravy is a good plus, but if you can't, just a good biscuit's fine. A little honey, a little jam.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I do like a sweet
sorghum
biscuit.
molasses on there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, now we're gonna get back to talking about what we're here for. So I know you've gotten this question a lot, and so we're going to repose it here so that you can answer it again. But how much shade is too much shade when you're planning for silvopasture and alley cropping both? I mean, those are going to be different slightly different answers, but how much is too much?
I mean, on silvopasture, 50% is a little too, is like you're hitting the threshold, and how do you judge that? I don't know. We plant the trees at, north to south orientation. So, our sun's moving over. So, one part to the other is going to be shaded. But, I think with the 50-foot rows on like a 25-foot tree, you're starting to move the shade over to the next row of trees. So, I mean, I think when I talk to people now around silvopasture, I recommend more of like a 60 to an 80-foot alleyway, just so that, you're not completely in shade. Because we're starting to see the effects of, as the trees are getting larger, I'm starting to see that I need to thin the trees out. Forage is like not growing as fast, and especially among pines, we're getting a lot of needle drop and we're losing forage. So we need to, invite a little more sunlight into the canopy there. So, I would say anything over 50% shade is a little too much. Alley cropping, that's going to vary as time goes on, right? And so I think you're just going to have to adapt. We went with, like a 30% shade, I guess, based on the trees and the row spacings. But, even as those trees get bigger, we're probably going to have to climb those trees and, prune them up higher to grow certain crops, or else we, change the crops that we're growing to more shade tolerant ones. But, right now we'd probably be good for, 5 to 10 years on what we're growing.
And do y'all have like a formal long-term management plan, or do you really have a lot of freedom to kind of adjust as you go through this process?
We do have a formal like 5-year plan on like, it's more around land management on like what we want to do with these sections of land. But what I've found in like the agroforestry realm and the regenerative agriculture realm is that you just need to adapt to, the conditions that are present to you. And so I do have free roam sort of as the farm manager here to say, all right, this is what we're looking at this year. I'm going to change it up. I'm not stuck in a box or anything. I can do what I feel like the land is telling me it needs to do.
Sure. Um, so, and I'm just, for those in the audience who haven't listened in on these before, these are mostly pre-submitted questions. So I'm just working my way through this list. What type of grasses do well in silvopastures, and have you amended your mixes over time?
Yeah, in silvopastures, I recommend a cool season mix, and that can, mean a lot of things. I know a lot of people don't like Kentucky 31 fescue, but I love it. If you manage it right, you hit it right, and you have a diverse mix, it's a really good one to have. In the silvopasture here at Catawba, when we started, it was only Kentucky 31. Actually had some problems with tree establishment because of it, because it can choke out, the trees in the younger stage and, prevent them from really getting the nutrients that they need. And so, we had to take some precautions like, the herbicide spray that I mentioned. And then we ended up actually getting as many boxes from Kroger as we could. And then we have a wood chipper here and made as many wood chips as we can. And then we started mulching them that way. And that really helped a lot more than the glyphosate did. But then, yeah, I frost seeded a lot of different things, or a few different things in there. I always like a red clover no matter where I'm at, especially in a cool season field. Having an adequate amount of red clover is always beneficial. I like orchard grass a lot, high energy output. And then I've put some Timothy in, which, does good in some places, not so good in others. But, as the warmer temperatures come on, Timothy's going to be like a fresher forage where you can, maybe get a break from the fescue toxicity if you have it, especially in the silvopasture system, and have a different forage that's also cool season.
Nice. So as y'all can see, Adam's a real brain. So keep the questions coming, because we're gonna fire through these and then have lots more time. So tell us about your team. What does your labor force look like at Catawba?
It's me mostly. I'm the only full-time employee. I get some funding for like a temporary summer wage sometimes. We just started with Virginia Cooperative Extension offers a summer internship program to undergrads, and we're looking to hire our second one ever this season, so we'll have them for like 10 weeks. But other than that, yeah,
Awesome.
it's mostly me. I'm out here on the land doing the thing.
So that leads us right into this next question is how do you balance your work and home life with all these diverse enterprises, especially if it's just you and cows out or you know, there's something imminent and it's just you. How do you make that balance work for you with all this diversity?
I have a really good wife, Liza. She's amazing. She understands. But yeah, it's knowing that you're not going to be on top of everything. You know, something when
Yeah.
you're putting your focus somewhere, something else is going to fall behind, and you can't get stressed about it and think you're going to be able to control it. You just have to move on. Um, you know, I try to make as many you know, preparations ahead of time to know that's not going to happen, to know that something bad's not going to happen. Like my cattle are used to the way we move. Rarely are there anything going to happen to them as they're going to get out, and I'm going to miss like picking up from the babysitter or whatever. But sometimes that does happen. You know, I remember I was doing a move and one of them just didn't get it, and then they were excluded from water, and I wasn't going to be there till the next day because I don't live at this farm. You know, and I had to call a babysitter and be like, I'm super sorry, I'm going to be late. And they were, you know, people are understanding. But it's just, yeah, you know, balance your time. Know you got to, you know, when it's time to quit, it's time to quit. I mean, I was really big on like making sure I finish everything till the end. And now I know it's like, all right, there's going to be a little residual to figure out tomorrow before I move on to the next thing. And yeah, I'm probably going to get behind, but you know, what can you stay on top of right now that is the biggest priority?
Prioritization. It's a good skill. Good skill to have. Um, all right. So how does the shade structure compare to trees in your system? We saw some pictures of, you know, your shade structure out in the open.
It's good. It's not as good as a tree though. You know, I can put that shade structure in a field where there's a tree and all the cows are going to move to the tree. For some reason they're getting better shade. The wind current seems to be a little bit better to cool them down, but in a pinch, it works great. If the one that I have is about 300 square feet. So once we get more than around 30 cattle underneath it, we start to see that they can stamp out you know, and create bare soil fairly quickly. So we need to move it regularly. So I was moving it once a day, but once we get over 30 head, I'm moving it twice a day. And that, you know, prevents me from having to go back and reseed areas and put hay down, you know, where they've stamped out the grass. And if it's wet, you know, it needs to be moved even more because if it's a wet day, they're going to, you know, make it. You just got to think that all of them are just going to cluster under this little thing. But, you know, in the springtime, when the grasses start coming up like we're seeing now, we see huge green circles in the field, you know, where it was, you know, where they
I
put
bet.
down a lot of really good carbon and organic matter.
Sure. So let's see, there's a few design questions here together. So I'll start with this one. How did you decide about spacing and species selection? And you definitely talked about spacing, and I know you talked about trainer trees, but were there any other commentary on that and maybe how folks might apply that in their own situations?
Is this to silvopasture or alley cropping or both?
You know, it's non-specific, so dealer's choice or answerer's choice. See, whatever
Okay.
that.
On silvopasture, I had no say in the species selection. And, you know, in full transparency, if I were planning silvopasture, I would probably choose species a little differently based on what I know right now. But from our silvopasture, from what I know, those trees were selected for trainers for high-end timber value. They weren't really looked at as like benefiting the cattle more than the shade. They
Mhm.
weren't looked at as forage crops or anything that you could, you know, enhance nutritional viability for the animals. I did have a bit of selection in the alley cropping, and of course I went for a nitrogen fixer. It's a crop field, you know, why not a
Yep.
good nitrogen fixer? And then the honey locust I did look at as like a, you know, it's a better forage than the black locust, maybe less nitrogen, but a better forage of the bean pods. And the tulip poplar I chose because I wanted something that was very leafy and herbaceous. so that as those leaves dropped, it was more organic matter coming down the system and not like pine needles, right? And then the red mulberry, it just does really well at Catawba. It's one of my favorite trees. I would put it in every system ever, an agroforestry system, and it's also good like fodder and feed for the cows.
Yeah. Do you want to touch any more on what you said a second ago about like if I had chosen these species, they'd be a little different? I can assume there would be some red mulberry in there.
Red mulberry, yeah, persimmon. I would do persimmon as well. And then I like this hybrid pitch lob. It's done really well here.
Nice.
I like a silvopasture system. Looking at like an evergreen is a good choice because it's consistent shade. It grows fairly quickly. Tulip poplar is not bad either, as long as you don't let the cattle graze it before it's too immature. Black locust is always a great one. We have it in our silvopasture. It can be used as fence posts if you want, but it's a heavy nitrogen fixer. It's some forage through its smaller bean pods. I like the Virginia pine. It would probably be one that I would look at. Yeah, I think keeping it simpler is better. From working in very diversified systems where like certain trees are going to grow at certain different rates and you're going to have to baby these along while these shoot up. I think limiting your species selection to like 4 or 5 is pretty smart. Just so you're not worried about all kinds of different diversity. While diversity is great, what I'm looking at, I always question in this agroforestry stuff is like, how are we putting the agro in agroforestry? And in a silvopasture system, I'm way more concerned about the diversity of the forages than I am about the diversity of the tree.
Yeah. That's a good good blurb. But it takes me right into this next question, which was, what design tips do you have for folks? I'm hearing simplicity, but I noticed that you talked a lot about equipment spacing. What else do you think maybe gets kind of like overlooked? Or I don't know if I feel like equipment spacing is a big one
Yeah.
personally, that can get forgotten. And then you end up with multiple passes and more compaction and just, gas and time wasting. But yeah, what are things in maybe alley cropping in particular? Do you have things that like design tips or things that you think might get overlooked?
Yeah, I mean, in alley cropping is like something we didn't realize till after we put it in, is like, oh my God, I need to put the cows in here. Like I need livestock in here. And we didn't even think about like how that would look, what are water points? How are we going to move fence? How do we move them through the 7 acres at the bottom to get to the 2 acres at the top without, messing that up? How do we deal with like pugging if it's wet or something like that? But we really need that animal impact, and it's not just an alley cropping. We say it's alley cropping because we're growing crops in between trees, but the land doesn't know that, the soil doesn't know that, and like for it to benefit, it really needs that animal impact. Another thing, yeah, that was another one where we kind of went a little crazy in our design and like too many species and trying to make hedgerows and and it being on a scale of that size, it's hard to, weed out for blueberries. It's hard to make sure comfrey makes it. And, when we manage 400 other acres, how do we have time to go and like make sure that these smaller plants make it when you're just worried about the trees making it and the crop making it? So again, the simpler design is better. Yeah. And then, it depends on your goals and, what you want to do. What's your farm look like? In a silvopasture, we were mowing, can you run poultry through there while those trees are growing? Can you run small ruminants through there while those trees are growing if you're not like into cattle? And does it need to be 9 acres? A good alley crop can be, a half an acre, 1 acre, and you can really intensify on that scale, but on a 9-acre scale, you probably just want to focus on trees and crops and making sure they all don't die.
Yeah, and this leads me into the last question before we break into the live audience questions. But how do you see alley cropping mixing into different landscape scales? Larger, smaller. You were going there a little bit, but it's I hear a lot of talk about the potential for alley cropping to like really be an inroads for making change in you know, in commodity cropping, in conventional ag. Do you have thoughts on that? What about small scale, garden scale? What do you think?
Yeah, in a garden scale, small scale, I think it's awesome because you like think of all the layers you can do of production, you know. You don't need to do like a locust or a tulip poplar. You don't need a big tree. Do an apple, do a pear, you know.
Hmm.
You're adding, you know, layers of value there. And then hedgerow, you know, with currants, elderberries, you know, things like that that can grow between them. And then you can have your vegetable garden in between that is benefiting from that. You're getting all the same benefits that you get from the alley cropping, and then you're just kind of layering your food production a little bit more. On a large scale, yeah, I mean, I see it. I mean, I'm kind of speaking out of context a little bit, but you know, on perennial wheats and stuff that are starting to happen, you know, having that access to shade as our climate warms, I believe are going to ensure the viability of certain of our crops. And yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know too much on a large scale.
Fair enough. All right, quick fire round two. Then we're going to head into the audience questions. Okay, so what are you nerdy about in your free time?
I mean, outside of ag, I mean, I used to lay at night like thinking of paddock designs, but yeah, I'm really into like folky like country music and learning how to, you know, play some of those songs on
Nice.
guitar or something. So I guess that would be it.
Any favorite artists you'd like to recommend?
Oh, I don't. Lately, I've been really into like revisiting like Justin Townes Earl, even though
Mm,
he passed
nice.
away. But, yeah.
All right. If you could only have one for the rest of your life, potato chips or French fries?
French fries.
Ooh, fast answer. All right.
Mm.
You know, I think I'm a potato chips person because French fries are bad cold.
Oh, I can eat 'em cold. Yeah, they're just heartier. You know, you get more out of them.
Um, okay, last one. What do you wish you could tell your young farmer self?
Things are going to take time.
Mm,
You know, everything just isn't going to happen. It doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you like, you know, don't eat dinner till 10 o'clock and try to get stuff done. That like it's not going to be any faster. In 5 years, you're still going to be at the same spot. You know, so take your
yeah,
time, slow down. It's a marathon. You know, work smart.
yeah. Yeah, kids help teach you that too. You got a little one.
Yeah, I think that's where I learned that.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start working through these. Dana asks, is your main forage endophyte infected fescue?
No, no. It's just a mix of a lot of different forages. The fescue we like. It's a good spring forage. Also, we do stockpiling, winter stockpiling, and it is amazing for that. And so, I mean, from what I see, that the grasses are just going to change as the season progresses. You know, you're going to have like right now we have like tons of red clover and white clover is out. Orchard grass is starting. Our cows are kind of finishing the fescue off. You know, as long as there's diverse there and you're not only on Kentucky 31 through the warm season, you're going to be fine. And in fact, you know, we plant the native warm season grasses. So in the hottest months of the year, we're grazing them. And then we're coming back to the fescue and hoping that it's there for the fall because we'll stockpile it and then we'll winter graze. Like I only fed 12 bales of hay this whole winter. Yep, only fed from
Oh,
middle of October to the middle of November. And then we had a bunch of young cows didn't know how to dig through the snow. So we got a little bit of snow and I fed like 3 bales then and until it came back. And so my cows are on grass today, have been. So fescues, it gets a bad rap.
yeah. Well, thanks for kind of talking about how it works in your system because you're right. It definitely gets trashed a lot. And I feel like I know as many people who are successfully working with it as who like hate it. Like it's kind of it'll split the room, you
Mhm.
know, but it's always good to hear success stories because it's out there, it's prevalent, it's pretty much what we've all got at least, you know, a high percentage of. So, do you also, from Dana, do you chop and chop any of those tree limbs for forage? And if so, when are you trimming?
I do not for the cattle. I trim usually this time of year, like any time from like February till maybe the end of April. I'll trim trees. But no, I don't drop them for the cows. They probably wouldn't eat much of that's in our silvopasture. Um, on my farm, where I raise goats, yeah, we definitely do that. Autumn olives, as soon as they leaf out, we throw them in. Pine trees, anything that's on the fence line, we'll throw into them and chop and drop because, they like that better than grass. Cows like grass. So we kind of focus
Right,
on this.
right. What are the greatest challenges you face within your silvopasture specifically?
Damage to the trees. Um, Again, you think I'm at Virginia Tech, I'm managing the silvopasture there for Virginia Tech for, interested faculty. And so when, something happens that we didn't intend on and, you have a missing row of trees because I turned the cows in too early, or they decided to all bunch up in this one realm of black walnuts and take a bunch of branches out. Um, that worries me because there's a lot of judgment, I guess, that comes from how we farm. If it were my farm, I wouldn't care. That's just like how it's happening, and that's kind of how I explain it here. But I think managing expectations um around the system and not just letting it be is kind of the biggest hardship that I handle. But other than that, like, nature is nature. It'll be what it'll be. All we can do is, like, try to mimic the best we can.
Yeah, there was another question that I didn't quite get to on the list before, but that ties in with what you were just talking about. Is what are some of the other constraints or situations you face working on university land that are maybe kind of unique?
Yeah, it's like the funding piece, like I said, the silvopasture, got a grant fund for 3-year period. 3 years is over. Of course, you plant a silvopasture from, bare root seedlings. It's gonna take more than 3 years of maintenance to get it to where you want it.
Yeah.
And so, our center has kind of been eating the cost of that without like anything in return. Another thing is, given our farm, there's not a lot of good mentorship. Like, I've been trying to figure this stuff out. I'm happy that like all these great resources happen now, but like 5 or 6 years ago, I was just like, well, I don't know what to do. And then, people come in and be like, why didn't you trim then? And why didn't you trim this? And like, why is it like that? And I'm just like, well, I'm trying my best, and no one actually, schooled me on this and told me how to do it. I'm just, observing and making changes as I see are necessary.
So a tree protection question. When you established the trees in the silvopasture system, were there tree tubes in place? And if so, how long were those how long were those tubes left on? And then I guess just a background question. If there weren't tubes, what was the protection scheme?
Yeah, we use tubes, shelters, as you want to call them, good and bad. Sometimes the shelters did really great. There's still shelters on some of the trees, and they're actually starting to bust out now finally and do what a shelter is supposed to do. Other times, we saw yellow jacket nests form in the shelters.
Yeah.
They hurt the tree. Actually, the tree would die after 2 years if you didn't take care of that. And then in 12 acres of trees, now we just have a mess of tubes like laying around that we have to pick up. But I do think that they were beneficial in the beginning, even though we had heavy deer pressure. And another thing about a university farm is we can't manage our deer population. We have to just let it be.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we did do like a 3D electric fence around the plot, which helped for a little while until the deer figured that out, and then they got in. So it's just certain species. So like the oaks and the chestnuts definitely
Mhm.
got killed by deer. The
Yeah.
chestnuts still stand at like that 4-foot browsing height. Um, where the deer get them. The tree's still alive, but the deer hit them there.
So you had 4-foot tubes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've tried some 5-foot tubes, and then we actually wrapped some in barbed wire. We tried that too. That became enticing on a, instead of the wooden stake, we went to a fiberglass stake. And because the fiberglass stake moves, it became enticing for the cattle to come and rub on the barbed wire with that stake, moving when they needed it to. And so they've pushed them over. And then we tried these like tri cages. They like make like a little triangle and they have pointy ends on the end. Those did really well for deer, but the cattle also like to rub on those. I didn't go to the lengths of like just like tons of polyline around trees. It just seemed like too much work for me. But I know that's another option that a lot of people have had success with.
Yeah. And I mean, in all of it, you've got to really suit it to your management preferences as much as capabilities, So, let's see. Have you ever tried any summer annuals in the rotation? I guess you answered that. Brent, if you have any more specific thing to ask about that, feel free to throw it in.
We plant about 5 acres of like sorghum Sudan that will hit when it's ripe. This year I'm moving into a more diversified spring and summer annual that I'm hoping to graze as well. And I think that will translate more into the alley cropping as years go by and planting some of the alleyways in annual crops. I just want to see, I'm really interested in like making the cattle performance, as top notch as it can be on perennial forages, but I don't want to exclude annual forages as like a possibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Stesha asks if you could change one thing about your silvopasture and alley cropping systems independently. So 2 things. What would that be?
I would have done less trees in the silvopasture, and like I said before, like a less variety of species and maybe a lot of different species. And I like the alley cropping station. We did it together. I probably would have excluded like the blueberries or something, but other than that, I like the trees selection and I like the comfrey and the false indigo that we put in there.
Yeah. Is some of that comfrey coming through now this year? Can you tell?
Yeah, it's coming up in spaces where it made it from last year.
Nice. Did you do any soil testing in those spaces? Do you have any like before and after evidence or anything like that?
Yeah, we do soil testing pretty regular. I can't say so much on the alley cropping. I think I'm pulling tests tomorrow on it from the initial tests that we did before we started. But yeah, in the silvopasture, just from the introduction of livestock into it, we've seen our organic matter, maybe 0.5% in 5 years, something like that, go up. And then we're starting to, question the grass growth rate. So in the last 2 years, we've been able to get an extra entry, what we call it, when we do, rotations, like how many entries can we get into a field. We've been able to get an additional entry at the end of the year into the silvopasture, which we don't get on the other fields. And so we're starting to question that the grass is growing more rapidly. And so why is that? One theory is that it could be that we mowed it for so many years that we train those roots down to go deeper, that now it grows a lot faster. The other theory is that we're like increasing a population of mycorrhizal fungi within the silvopasture, that fungi is going to attach to a tree species more than it would to like an open field of grass. And so it's creating more of a mycelial network that's sharing nutrients and creating the grass to grow faster. Things that we need to research and understand, but those are just theories that, from what we observe.
Yeah, and I'll bet it's a whole host of things too. I know that like staggering statistic for every 1% of organic matter you add to the soil, you can store 20,000 gallons more water. Right. For every single percent. So you know that you're storing more water than you were before in the landscape as well. It's cool stuff. Elena asks, what's the balance between research and demonstration at the different sites?
Basically we call it a demonstration site till we have something to research. So it's established as a demonstration because you really can't research something until like a system is mature. And now as some of the systems are becoming mature, we are starting to research what the effects they're having on like the overall ecology of the farm, I guess.
Are there any you've been there for how long? 10 years?
8 years.
8 years.
Mhm.
Have there been any like particularly interesting like research, I don't know, products in that time?
Yeah, we did a conservation credit agroforestry production was it called, and we researched phosphorus uptake of agroforestry trees within a swale system.
Oh,
So that
cool.
was pretty interesting, finding that, you know, the number of stems per acre, I forget now, you know, uptook, you know, X amount of X tons of phosphorus out of a system. That was pretty cool. We're doing some biochar research, and we're looking at how high temperature and low temperature made biochar breaks down over a three-year period in 3 different soil types, and seeing what NPK it lends to, as well as organic matter, and then how it might be pulling carbon down from the atmosphere into the soil.
Cool.
And
You
then
guys are
of
so
course we're
hip.
pulling data on our beef, you know, so monthly weight gain averages, forage qualities, and then, you know, carcass finish.
Hmm. Really cool research. Yeah, and the phosphorus piece is really, my husband and I produce a lot of poultry, and so I find that really interesting because if you're in, for those who don't know, if you're in long-term poultry rotations and you don't have trees in your system, like just an open pasture, the grasslands will not cycle that phosphorus through. So you really do need woody species to do that work, and that's one of the reasons we've got interested in silvopasture in the beginning. So yeah, I love hearing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got ahead of myself because there was something else I wanted to ask you. Oh, have you seen, I was in a conversation with someone recently talking about how there's so much good agroforestry research and a lot of great silvopasture research in particular, and how it's really hard to find like definitive economic research. I just wonder if you have any commentary on that or just any thoughts on it. Do you find it to be silvopasture in particular to be like economically feasible or economically beneficial, like in a concrete way? I mean, I feel like there's all this evidence that like, yeah, we know animal welfare is a good thing and more nutritious meat is a good thing. And there's all these like tertiary benefits, but specifically economically, I'm just curious if you'd like to weigh in.
I mean, I haven't seen it myself. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. But yeah, I see the economic benefits in, you know, low stress in animals. Is, you know, is that producing a better, you know, if you're a cow calf or you're lambing, or, you know, are you creating an environment for that animal to have a longevity of birthing, that like their stress is so low that they do well with their offspring, that you're not supplementing, implementing, you know, and creating costs related to that. I
Right.
think we forget that, like, when we create the environment that makes, you know, the animal husbandry, um, you know, run smoother, where we don't have sick animals, where we don't have problems, that we're actually saving a lot of costs in that. And I think silvopasture in particular goes a long way with that. In the alley cropping scenario, you know, it's all about our soil health. And so if we are, you know, growing a crop without, you know, fertilizing, spraying, all these different inputs that are going into that system because the trees are given that, yeah, we having a, you know, we're making economic difference on our farm. And it's not about like, how many trees per acre am I going to get X amount of dollars? It's more about how are you creating the environment that's going to save your farm from, you know, expensive off-farm inputs like in the future. That's where it balances out for me and the way I look at it.
Awesome. Well said. Um, And let's see, one more from Dana. Did you have to get rid of the fescue to establish the summer perennials?
If you do want to grow summer perennials, yes, you do need to outcompete them somehow. And there's a couple ways we've done that. I experiment a couple ways, glyphosate, absolutely. That's going to do it. Spray, spray in the spring, no-till planted in, it should work pretty good. Some of the summer perennials are pretty aggressive, especially like this sorghum Sudan that I had mentioned. So I've just been clipping them really small. I have a flail mower. It's almost like a finishing mower, but it mows at like 10 feet wide. So I've been, for summer propagation, I've been running that through and then no-till seeding right into that. And yeah, it's not 100%. I'm not getting like the exact, everything they say on the label. I'm still going to have some Johnson grass and some fescue in there, but I'm still getting a crop, especially if we're looking at grazing. And you don't want to graze something that's just like one species. You want to have some diversity in there. So yeah, I'm being able to do that without chemical input.
Very cool. All right, so just a couple more. Where did that go? Oh, would you recommend these practices to beginning farmers and any specific beginners tips? I know we've talked about simplicity. I bet that's gonna
Yeah,
ring
yeah.
true again.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely would. Like if I'd known this, starting my farm from scratch, when you're starting up, that's the best time to do these things. If you really are looking at the long term, the first thing you want to do is go in and plant trees. Is the way I see it. And it doesn't have to be like we're doing it. Like in my farm, it's a small, homesteady kind of farm. My silvopasture is all apples and pear trees that I run pastured poultry under. Really big benefit to those trees. I have trees in places that I don't run pasture poultry, and the ones where I do are like out competing them, 3 times. It's a great environment. So yeah, if you're a beginning farmer and you're interested in agroforestry, beginning is the time to do it. You'll enjoy those trees, and your system will enjoy those trees, as you mature as a farmer. And what was the second part of the question? What design considerations?
If you would have any just modifications or specific suggestions, to target beginner practitioners.
Yeah, keep it simple. Don't overthink it. That's the best advice that I can give. Follow the direction. There's a couple good books. This is one of my favorite silvopasture books. Grazer's Guide to Trees, Austin Ulrich. And
Yeah.
these webinars and everything is the way to do it. That's what we're here for. Reach out to me, reach out to Emilie. We're here to help and help you think through all the things we screwed up before, we started making it look like it was going to be right.
Heck yeah. And also, I'll add to that, just, not only keep it simple, but don't get bogged down in just, the analysis paralysis. Like at some point you gotta pull the trigger. You can plan it to death. And that's something that I feel just happens a lot. So, some point trust yourself and you can learn. You can learn as you go. You're going to no matter what. So okay, last one. If you could wave a wand, what would Catawba look like in 20 years?
Oh man, the farm would be just completely developed. We're only operating at probably like 60% capacity right now. I'm haying a lot of hay fields that I don't want to hay. I'd like to have more livestock on them, more silvopasture, more alley cropping, but right now, just given our funding constraints and our lack of resources, that's just how it is. So yeah, 20 years, I would love to have new buildings. Or I don't know if you've ever been here. If anybody's been here, our buildings are falling apart and it just looks bad. But an adequate, meeting space and a lab space and a classroom space, and then the whole farm developed into like a functioning ecosystem, that we're doing biomimicry, wherever we are, and kind of looking at where we can, press the limits without, chemical interaction.
Nice. What a beautiful vision to end on. If people want to visit Catawba or just like learn more about it, where should they go? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we have a website. It's Catawba, CATAWBA.VT.edu. You can find my contact information there as well, adamht@vt.edu. I probably can't just give everybody a tour that wants a tour, but we have a number of field days, workshops, things like that are always happening here. Encourage you to be a part of. If you're a part of a group and want to have a tour, I can probably arrange that. But yeah, I'm a pretty busy guy, so just can't give everybody a tour, which I wish I could.
And as a part of the Learn Agroforestry, the Agroforestry trainings for natural resources professionals, there's also a series of it's late now, I'm starting to lose my words, and you're the one who's been talking. A series of site tours, and so geared at natural resources professionals. So if you are in that category and you want to learn more about that stuff, definitely check out the website. We have this link in the chat now to this short eval. Please, please, please fill it out. It really does help us. Again, we're a nonprofit. We're working with the university. We're working on grants. It really, really helps us to be able to kind of cite the data from, people enjoyed this, people didn't enjoy this. This is what they want to see more of. The more we can qualify that, the better we can continue to do our job. So please go ahead and fill that out, and stay tuned to the ASD website and social media for announcements about upcoming webinars. Our next month's webinar is still pending. We'll let y'all know when we've got it figured out. But for now, thanks so much. Thank you so much, Adam, for taking your Wednesday night when you could have been working late to hang out with us and work late in this fun way. So we really appreciate you. We appreciate all that you're doing for agroforestry and all the incredibly hard work you're doing at Catawba. Thanks, Katie, for all the background work. Katie's been a huge part of getting all this off the ground this year. This winter series she's been absolutely instrumental. So super grateful. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye.